Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Tonight's session is an open discussion. So basically, any of the topics that you guys bring up in chat, we will cover. I had also received a few topics via email, and I will try and cover them as well. I'm really sorry I didn't get a chance to post this week's image of the week because, well, my son fell asleep on the sofa, and my daughter just went upstairs like 15 minutes ago, and then I got in here. But that said, let's basically hit the ground running. The first question/topic that I received via email, it's a long one, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read it all out to you. We speculated a bit inside the room as to what, I am sorry about that, as to what it's about. Also, let me think about this. Can I do this? If anybody in chat is interested in getting inside of the room, just say yes, and I'll try and shoot you the link to get you in here, because we could use a few more people in the panel to discuss this stuff. Okay, let me read off the question. Many imagers have long or short-range remote control using software like TeamViewer, VNC, with a PC at each end. While these arrangements work, in his opinion, it's far from an optimal solution. Much of the functionality possible is realized using ASCOM-compliant hardware and software. He'd be interested in our experience and current setups, as well as our thoughts on an idea, probably not original, that he has. He thinks they could streamline both hardware and software requirements for remote control using a standardized hardware base and a protocol allowing a low-power controller, a Raspberry Pi, for example, to implement control and data transfer from a remote high-performance remote computer. In effect, reversing the roles as currently used. Such a setup would be ideal for a scope-mounted controller, simplifying wiring and power management. Cheers, Rob. Okay, I see one person that may want an invite. I'm going to try and shoot it. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this in the room. We have not had the issue of people jumping in here and spamming us or anything. So, how is it not going to let me post a link? There you go. That's a link that will bring you directly into this room. You will be live. If you have a camera, we might see your face. If you want to cover up your video camera, you can. If you have a microphone, you're welcome to join. We won't see your face, but we'll hear your voice. And let me know if that link does not work. So yeah, on Rob's question, if you have a microphone, you're welcome to join. And please mute your microphone. Excuse me. Yeah, mute your microphone as soon as you enter, because I'll get reverberation. I will try and not talk while you're talking to prevent that. Thank you.
Also pause the live stream on the other side, so because there's a delay. If you're watching the YouTube video or you're on the channel,
yes,
and you're in here, there's a delay in between.
Yeah, pause the live stream. You'll get it all from in here. So first of all, is it original? No, actually, we had a gentleman on who had developed a for a Raspberry Pi. First, he developed the software protocol that went on it, which basically was almost full automation. It was called K-Stars, I believe, based on the indie platform. His name is Jasem Mutlaq. But then he introduced it as a basically out-of-the-box, off-the-shelf product. And for some terrible reason, the name of it's escaping me. I remember his name. I remember the name of the protocol, but I don't remember the name of the finished product that he had. So if anybody in chat remembers it, we actually did a show on it and gave away a few of them. It's something star or star something. But if any of you can help me out, I'd love to share that with everybody else. But the concept, yes. What we do now is we have EKOS. EKOS is either the software that or the platform that the software runs on. He actually developed. It is a Raspberry Pi based computer in a basically in a case that has all sorts of ports that you might need for power wiring, etc. It's basically astronomy specific, so it gives you everything you need. But yeah, I forget the name of the finished product. I will definitely come up with it. Excuse me. Before the end of the show. Yeah, so typically what we do now, we'll have, or let me say this, the way we did it 3 to 5 years ago, we'd have a laptop at our telescope that would have a USB cable running up the mount, through the mount, or possibly just beside the mount, to the camera, the focuser, what am I missing? Power to the camera. So you've got 2 USBs, you've got power to the focuser. You've got your focuser controller down below. So you've got a lot of wires going back and forth. Then you've got this computer, the computer I'm sitting at, and I basically just use any sort of remote software to show me what's going on the screen of that computer. It gives me full control of the screen of that computer. The benefit of doing it that way is, let's say I lose internet. Well, I've started that computer. It's not relying on commands from this computer to go to that computer. It's not like take image 1, wait 60 seconds, take image 2. Those commands are not coming from this computer. They're not going over the internet. They're going directly from the computer that's out of my observatory to the telescope. The data is getting stored on the laptop out there. So basically, I lose internet. Let's say my computer is out in New Mexico. I lose internet here. I lose internet there, wherever it may be. Because the software is designed to run the entire session, it's not waiting for the command. It still runs the session without the internet. And it basically just chugs along until it's done. It parks the telescope at the end. And all I'm remote doing is seeing what's going on the screen. I can change what's going on. I can log in if I have internet. I can do whatever I need. But everything is executed from that computer. Now, excuse me, I need to take a sip of my coffee. I've got a frog in my throat or something. So in more recently, we've been using smaller computers. These basically they can mount on the top of your on the top of your optical tube, eliminating the long runs of USB, eliminating a lot of the wire runs. Basically, you only have power going up. Yes, TeamViewer does require an internet connection. Basically, any remote software is going to require an internet connection, but the computer on that end is not relying on the commands going over. You can run without it, but it's in the settings. TeamViewer, I do not. Oh, okay. In other words, running it over IP. Yeah, like running a local IP. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, that's if you're on the same network.
If you're on the same network.
Right. Yeah. If you're remote on the next state or next country, right, you still one way or another internet. And going back to the Raspberry Pi, we're still dealing with. It may not be TeamViewer, but it's VNC Viewer or something. We're still dealing with a, remote desktop software. I mean, there are many of them. There's LogMeIn, there's VNC server, and TeamViewer is the most popular one by far. And there's also a free one that you can get for Google Chrome. It's called Chrome Remote Desktop, which I started using recently. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're still watching that remote computer. And it's almost like having a camera pointed at the screen and watching that camera and having access to the keyboard. I don't know any other way to do it. And the advantage is, just like Adam said, once you start that session on that remote computer, you can basically disconnect from your end, and that remote computer will run by itself.
First of all, let me say this. StellarMate is Jasem's product, and it's worth checking out. Very, very reasonably priced. Actually cheaper than most of the computers that we would buy to custom build into an OTA top computer, but extremely feature rich and basically, I don't know, astronomy specific and supported. So check that out if it sounds interesting. Bob, I think your name was. But yeah, so it's basically technology enabling us to have smaller computers that are able to run full, execute basically full commands and whatnot, and have enough USB ports and enough power to power the USB ports, but they're doing it over Raspberry Pi. So I'm not.
Adam, can I pop in here?
Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Terry from Australia. I run a remote observatory several hundred kilometers out in the mountains here, and I have several redundancies to get into my site because I'm simply not there. I can use everything is completely off grid, electricity, telecoms. It's out in the middle of nowhere. So I have to have several ways of getting in. One of the things I do use is, in fact, a Raspberry Pi. So I've built an all-sky camera. That also serves as a SSH log session. When you establish one of those, you can establish a graphical tunnel through an SSH channel. So it's effectively like it's on my network here. In fact, I get better performance through that than I do through TeamViewer or any other protocol that I have used. Redundancy is key if you're running remote. And the Raspberry Pi is a very simple, cheap alternative. It just sits out, looks at the sky, but it also serves as a remote access point for me. And I can toggle software with it as well. I also built all the control systems where everything is independent of a PC. It all runs on schedules. Equipment switches on, switches off. There are several watchdogs involved. I'm not there. So it's quite involved, but it's a good solution. It's very cheap, the Raspberry Pi, to do this, and the performance is, like I said, better than what I've got with TeamViewer. If you tunnel through an SSH shell, which networking is what I do for a living, so I find it trivial, but others may not.
So you're off the, you said off the grid, but it must have internet, correct?
I do it through the mobile network, actually, through 4G network. Yeah, I'm completely off the grid. There's nothing out there.
Huh.
So I've got big Yagi antennas pointing to the nearest cell tower. I had to find out where they were. There's nobody around where this thing is. It just sits out there and looks at the sky. So yeah. So it's been about a 5-year project to get it to the point where I'm at now. Mm-hmm. So there's all the embedded systems. I've built all of those. But I can have a chat. I sent you an email. I could have a chat about just powering systems because I have a big solar array out there. I've heard people give advice on batteries before, but I've never piped up and said anything. So I've been a bit shy about it. But
yeah, we definitely like to hear that. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, because it does run 24/7, and power requirements are a little bit steeper than what people envision. It's not just one single battery. It's you can't have it die, because if it dies and it's out of power and there's rain's coming in, you're in trouble. Yeah. But yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Sorry for popping in like that. But yeah,
no problem. No problem.
okay.
So I'm not Rob. So I'm not quite sure what your thought would be. But if it is something like the Stellarmate, definitely take a look at that. Carrie, I need to mute you.
Yeah, go ahead.
For some reason, it is not letting.
Gotta help.
Over here, got it. But check out Stellarmate, because I think that's something that does probably what you're talking about. Because yeah, your point is correct. ASCOM, the functionality is there. It's just a matter of only needing the minimal computer at the mount end, the lightest weight, just minimal requirements, both for power. Weight's important, because I always envision these things on the top of the OTA to limit the wire runs. I foresee wire runs being a potential issue, particularly remote.
Yes, more of a problem than the weight of the computer is more of a problem than potential wire snag.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, it's even a shorter run from your CCD, a shorter USB run from your CCD camera to your acquisition computer gives me peace of mind. CCD cameras can be temperamental sometimes, and if you're getting some sort of interference, that shorter run is better. Plus, shorter cable, less opportunities to break. Probably not an issue in New Mexico skies, but I know here in the middle of the winter, my cables are like frozen solid. So if I move them, for that matter, I could break them easily. When you have your CCD mounted on top, your computer mounted on top and your CCD on the back of the OTA, that wire never flexes, never has to move. It always just kind of stays fixed with the camera. When it's running through the mount, it is constantly moving. So frozen wire and then a bend point like that is trouble waiting to happen. And remote trouble is big trouble. All right, I'm trying to read through some of the chat. What I do frequently is I'll be at my lake house imaging, or I'll be here imaging, and as long as I can access internet from that computer, I'll pull it up on my cell phone. I'll be able to watch it in bed. I won't have to be at a PC. And TeamViewer has iPhone and Android software. So it's just really convenient to do that way. I know that basically everything these days is accessible via a cell phone. But that's the key point is you need the computer at the mount end to be running everything, start to finish. You're just looking at it. You're just checking in on it from your cell phone. You're not really sending commands. You can choose to, but you're actually going to log into that computer and send the command from that computer. A lot of new devices are coming out with web-based consoles, which is a good point as well. And I've always liked web-based consoles. So basically, you basically type in the IP address of the of whatever you're trying to log into. in your web browser, whether it's your cell phone, your computer, whatever, and it basically brings up a web page that only you can access, possibly password protected, and then you can operate it from that web-based interface, which is a good way of doing it. But my concern with that is I shouldn't say my concern with it. There are a few capabilities that it then has to have. If your camera has a web-based utility, then I want it to also have a focus controller built into it, because I want to only have to log into the camera web-based utility and control everything. I don't want to have to log into multiple web pages, one for the camera, one for the mount, for example, one for the focuser. Basically, what ASCOM does is it allows one program to control everything. So the capability does exist, but I think rather than a web-based protocol for the device, it might be better to just have a web-based protocol for the individual devices for the overall acquisition computer.
Adam, ACP, Bob Denny software as ACP does have that capability for ACP, which it will create a web page,
Yes.
and you don't need you just type the IP address, and then you see the ACP console on whatever browser you have. Like you can go in through your phone. You don't need a remote desktop software.
Right.
Which is actually, that's the way he recommends people use ACP.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody listens to him, but
well, it makes sense for an acquisition software. Even more so for his, because his is more script based and command line based, whereas something like Sequence Generator Pro, I think I would say is more visual based. But I think ACP tends to be really almost 100% intended for that. I don't want to say off the grid remote, but that remote bulletproof system. Whereas Sequence Generator Pro, a lot more people are going to be using it locally. I think if I were to go remote, are you using? You don't use Sequence Generator Pro, that's right. I don't even know of anyone that's using Sequence Generator Pro remotely. I know a few people have tried, and no reason why it wouldn't be successful. But
no, it would work. It would just be, it would work like any other. As long as you're using it with like a TeamViewer kind of thing, you just go in there, and it would just like be running it from your house in your backyard, remote. The only thing, the one thing I like about the ACP, I know this is sounding like an ACP commercial, so is that if you have the scheduler with it and you tell it how many targets of which it has, it knows what's left over for the next night. So let's say you want 40, 10, 10, and 10 of each filter. If it takes the 5 of X filter tonight, it knows that those are done. So now it knows it. You don't have to go in there and reprogram it. In fact, you could just start it one time, and you don't have to go back in there again,
right,
until it's done with its jobs.
Right. Yeah, and it's true automation, right? You don't have to click start nightly.
Yeah, you can basically let it run.
You can let it run, and it can decide whether it's going to image based on.
Yeah, it will shut down. Like it will shut down. With the roof, and it will open the next night. It will just open the roof back up, and it will start its jobs.
Yeah.
And there's a queue of jobs in this list, and it will just go through them. It doesn't require unless it requires you to enter more targets.
Right.
But that's about it.
But with scheduler, you enter 90 or 100 targets, and it's basically picking out the right ones at the right time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, but you still, I mean, in concept, I know that's what Bob always wants you to do, and he's pitched it to me. But it takes away your evaluation of your data as you're going along. It's just starting and stopping based on certain parameters that you've set up. And I find that you're already removed from the whole process remotely. This takes you even more removed, like you have nothing to do with the telescope. And for some of us that like to at least feel remotely that we might be touching the telescope, Scheduler kind of takes that away. So I like not to use Scheduler and still go in there and start it and stop it every night, which is still basically automated. And at the same time, it gives me an opportunity to evaluate the data from the night before to determine, not in advance, whether I need some additional data for one filter or another. So that's not a commercial against Scheduler, but I think it fits some people's method of operation better than others.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I can even think of there's certain things we do. Sequence Generator Pro, for example, will all I have to do is click start, and it will frame and focus and then start acquiring. But I do like to focus in advance because I like to get an idea as to what my conditions are like, and then I probably want to focus 10 minutes later just to make sure that if I'm cooling down, I'm still kind of nailing it. I want to make sure that the conditions are good enough that my focus is going to give me a good B curve through the night. So even though I know I could probably go out, click start, walk away, come back in the morning, it'll be parked and all good. I still do choose to do certain things myself to kind of keep myself involved in the process.
Now, Adam, this is probably going to sound a little weird, but I like to watch it do its thing. Even if it's remote, even if it's script, it is, the reason we do this is because of the excitement of gathering data and watching this thing perform. Even if it's automated, even if it's scripted, watching it perform, watching it focus, gathering one or two images and seeing what the quality, even evaluating them, as they're being accumulated, at least in the beginning, gives me some satisfaction, which you don't get if it's totally remote. Then you're just picking up your data. In fact, you don't even have to pick up your data. It will place your data where you can get it automatically, and you basically never have to see or touch, even remotely, the telescope. So I like to keep that contact with the setup.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Even though you own the setup, or you have put the effort into the setup, at some point you separated yourself so much you almost feel like you're processing someone else's data.
That's exactly right.
If you're not the one that's taking care of the baby, that's feeding the baby, that's changing the baby's diaper, then it's not your baby.
It's not your baby. That's a good analogy. I agree. Again, that's not a commercial against Scheduler, because Scheduler is very popular, and I know that a good percentage of the people use Scheduler instead of, say, TeamViewer to start scripts every night.
So Terrastron is leaning towards upgrading his camera to the ASI ZWO 1600 and has concerns about the lack of the anti-reflective coating. I'm actually not familiar with that camera or that potential issue. I'm guessing it's on the glass. Is it it's not an infrared? I guess it's an infrared filter, right? That would be on the glass in front of the sensor. That would be the only glass that should be in the camera. But I hadn't heard anything about an issue with lack of AR. With filters, you may not have much of an issue. I don't know if you're playing on, is that a color or a mono camera? And as you can see, I'm speaking about a camera I know very little about.
What he's talking about is that that Panasonic sensor. I'm not going to talk about manufacturers. Let's talk about the sensor. because it applies to everybody who makes a camera with that sensor. So, so what he's talking about is an AR coating that's on the sensor, not in the camera glass, the chamber glass. He's talking about the sensor, the protected glass that's on the sensor itself. So that Panasonic chip does not have that, and some people have reported reflection issues. But I mean, look at how many people are using that camera happily. So you can't bash it for that. But it applies to any camera that has that Panasonic sensor on in it.
Okay. So are they on maybe the micro lenses, coating on the micro?
They're not on it. That's the issue. So a lot of the sensors that we use, the sensor itself has like a piece of glass on it, and that glass. We're not talking, again, I want to clarify, we're not talking about the chamber glass that the camera manufacturer puts on the camera. We're talking about the coating that's on the sensor itself. There's nothing they could do about that. They buy it from Panasonic. So, yeah, some people did report reflections on it. I think it's minimal. It's a good starter camera. Like I always said. But what I asked the person who asked the question is that what is he upgrading from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And keep in mind, I see Martin below, usually only an issue on Bright Star as well. A lot of us with really expensive CCD cameras and really good filters still occasionally get reflections on Bright Stars. So keep that in mind. Does anyone have experience with Hyperstar advantages, disadvantages versus a refractor? So we've done a show on Hyperstar that you should probably go back and watch. Actually, Dylan O'Donnell had done it, and it really covered a lot. So advantage, disadvantage versus the refractor. The advantage is it's going to be a bit faster. I think you're at f2.8, I believe. And you're going to have I don't want to say you're going to have more focal length, but let me think about that. You'll most likely have a little bit more focal length than you would a well, do I compare price? Do I compare size? It's hard to compare. It's not really apples to apples because a refractor is such a nice small package. Refractors are pretty fast to begin with. Something with the same focal length, a refractor with the same focal length as Hyperstar is probably going to be f6. So to have Hyperstar like f2.8, it's going to be a lot faster. And I hear some beeps, so maybe people are correcting some stuff. I don't know. They're talking about the 1600. So the Hyperstar is going to be a lot faster. You're going to get the data a lot faster. You're going to be able to shorten your exposures. That said, at that,
I'll say a couple of things about the Hyperstar. So the Hyperstar, the advantage is the speed, f2 crazy speed. The disadvantage is the speed, f2 crazy speed. Anytime you have, you're going to collect a lot of data very fast, but at the same time, you're going to get all those disadvantages that comes with speed. Every little tilt issue, every little focus issue is going to be exaggerated as much as the exposure time. So even your exposure times are going to be much shorter, but your problems are going to be exaggerated with the same multiplier. So technically, it could work very well, but you have to have it dialed in very good.
Yeah, that's basically the point I was going to make is at that speed, collimation becomes extremely important, and you have to collimate Hyperstar. You do not have to worry about collimation on refractors for the most part. When you get to some of the fastest refractors, sometimes you might have an issue, and I'm talking like the tacks when you're reducing them to that same speed. Sometimes you might have slight issues with tilt and the star is just not looking right in the corners, but that is because you're pushing it to that ridiculously fast speed. It is a little bit more difficult to accomplish with an SCT, and that's why it's that much more important to have dialed in the Hyperstar. Now, more recently, Celestron had introduced the RASA, the RASA, which is basically the same idea as the Hyperstar, the same concept, imaging where the secondary mirror would be. But it's optimized a lot better. So whereas the star shape on the Hyperstar might be, it's good, good enough for most people, but some of the pros might really get critical. The RASA is just much more optimized, but you cannot look through it. You cannot use it visually. It's optimized for astrophotography, whereas the Hyperstar is basically an attachment that goes onto the SCT, which is already the Swiss Army knife of telescopes, right? Pretty darn good for planetary viewing, pretty darn good for deep sky viewing, pretty darn good for imaging, planetary imaging. The only slight issue with an SCT is that it's slow, and then Hyperstar kind of fixes that issue with just some slight things you have to do to make sure that it's all dialed in. That's basically what you'll get from me on Hyperstar. Someone saying they have the ZWO 1600, haven't noticed, only on bright stars. Another person saying no weird ghost images. Another person saying the only issues were with the 1600 were with the Optolong narrowband filters, and you know, there could always be some sort of anytime you have multiple glass surfaces interfacing, there could be an issue with reflections. And I suspect in a large portion of those cases, if the filter was able to be moved back like almost a fraction of a millimeter, it would fix it, because you're just kind of changing that stuff. But in a lot of cases, you cannot change where those filters are. I even think that the thickness of the filters might have something to do with it, whereas a thicker filter and a thinner filter, one will show the reflection, one may not. Every surface is an opportunity for reflection. So aperture's bigger on the Hyperstar, so you should get more theoretical resolution. You should get more theoretical resolution, but since you're shooting wider, you have to make sure that your sampling is going to be high enough. The camera that shoots for Hyperstar might not be the perfect camera that's going to be attached to the back. Probably isn't the same camera that's going to be attached to the back of the SCT. Critical focus is extremely tight at f2. You really want a remote focuser so that you could turn it a fraction of a millimeter there as well. Another person saying issue with the Optolong 12 millimeter 03 big halos. 03s are, I know I had issues with halos on my 03 Baader filters. Maybe they're just prone to it. George Lutch loves his f2 11-inch light bucket. Yeah, I mean, it's 11 inches of aperture. That when you're talking about an 11-inch, you've got pretty decent focal length even at f2. That's a nice. I'd be more interested in a Hyperstar on an 11-inch than I think an 8-inch. I feel like at an 8-inch, some of the troubles you're getting, it might just be worth getting a refractor, settling for a slightly slower speed. But with an 11-inch, you've got that focal length and the speed. Just have to get it dialed in. Does switching between Hyperstar and secondary create any collimation problems? In my experience, now I have not had Hyperstar, but with the SCT, you are able to remove the secondary. You basically unscrew a ring that's holding the secondary on. You hold the secondary on, you unscrew the ring comes off, and then you can pull that whole secondary unit out, put it back in, screw the ring on, and it does not impact collimation. I don't know if with Hyperstar, removing Hyperstar and putting Hyperstar back on, whether it has to be recollimated. George is saying he hasn't had collimation issues switching them out.
Yeah, it should be no different than taking the mirror off and putting it back in, because the collimation of the Hyperstar and the collimation of the mirror are done on two different surfaces. So taking the mirror off, putting the Hyperstar and putting the mirror back off is no different than taking the mirror off and putting it back in. So, theoretically, nothing should change. And both of them should hold collimation.
The secondary mirror is keyed. So with an SCT, the secondary mirror at the factory is, I don't want to say it's matched to the primary mirror. I think at one point they actually did match the secondaries to the primary mirrors. But at this point now, they just determined the optimal performance rotationally, and they align them rotationally. And then as long as that secondary is in the same position as the primary, you're fine. So they key the secondary, they put a little notch in it so that when you slide it in, it's always in that same rotational position. On the Edge HD, they are matched. Yeah, so they're going through specific mirror and corrector combos. Yeah, the corrector in the mirror, not the secondary. Right? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Friction drive mounts. Friction drive, are they direct drive?
I think he's talking about the Meizu mounts as friction drive.
Yeah, I don't think we have. I would have to look into them and see what I can come up with on them. Yeah, Meizu. I will do some research on them. I'll reach out and I'll see what I can come up with. Any other topics? Anyone inside the room have anything? JTW mount as well. Since it was a short, since it was an open session, planetary astrophotography. I would love to try and find someone that could give a talk on planetary astrophotography. We've done solar in the past. I don't remember us ever doing planetary. Oh, roll-off roof automation. I'd like to hear on that as well. We did have someone do something on roll-off roof automation a long time ago. It might have just been an aside during a show, but I seem to remember something like that. I will look for that. If I can't find that, I will put that on my list of topics as well. But since it was a short show, I don't mind ending it a little bit early today. I had a long week of work, and I have a long week next week of camping, which is going to be fun, particularly since it's basically calling for rain every day. So we'll see what happens. But guys, thanks for watching. We will let me run through my my whole spiel here. Always looking for presenters. I know that Terry, you offered to do something on remote power. I will hit you up probably via email shortly, and maybe get you on in one of the next few weeks. But anyone out there, if you have a topic you're willing to present on, have something you just want to talk about, or have an issue, this is one of those things that when we started out we were doing and we haven't done recently. You're processing data, you're stuck, something is wrong, it's just not working for you. Well, I'll give you the screen. You can process it for us, you can show us where you're stuck, and we'll call out suggestions. Maybe we'll download your data and walk you through the step. Maybe it's a piece of gear or whatever it may be. We'll help you out that way. But hit me up. The contact form is on our website. A lot of you probably have my email already. Yeah, and then we'll hope to get some presentations out of this. So that's all I've got for now. Thank you all for coming. Thanks all in the room for wow, I've got some tongue twisters going on, for participating, and we'll see you next week. Good night, guys.